Okay, so when you hear the name Charles Darwin, what comes to mind? Probably this, right? The monumental thinker, the revolutionary mind. But what if I told you the true story of his genius wasn't just in his head, but in the physical, chaotic mess he left behind? What if it's a story told not in grand theories, but in tiny, forgotten pinholes?
So on one side, you've got the icon, the intellectual giant, we all know. But on the other side, that's something else entirely. It's way more intimate and honestly, way more revealing. It's the ghost of a simple pin. And these little holes, they're all over thousands of his documents, telling a story of a process that was anything but neat and tidy. And this brings us to the big question for today. I mean, how does a world-changing theory come from this? How did one of the most structured ideas in all of science pop out of this total chaos of cut-up letters, old notes, and thousands of straight pins? Well, the answer? It kind of changes how we think about genius itself. All right, so to really get this, we've got to look past Darwin the icon and meet Darwin the tinkerer. We need to step away from those perfect published books and get our hands dirty in the workshop where he literally hammered his ideas into shape. You see, Darwin's method was super physical. He wasn't just, sitting there writing. He was an editor in the most literal sense of the word. I'm talking scissors, glue, the whole deal. He was cutting up letters, sticking fragments onto new pages, pinning notes to old drafts. His archive wasn't a library. It was this living, breathing, modular system. And get this whole physical process wasn't just happening in his study in England. Oh no, it was powered by a huge global network of people who were mailing him not just ideas, but actual tangible evidence. We're talking insects, plants, detailed notes, stuff that he would literally pin right into his work. Now, a couple of the key players in this network were these two guys, Henry Walter Bates and Fritz Muller. They both ended up in Brazil around the mid-1800s, and once Darwin published On the Origin of Species, they basically became his eyes and ears in the Amazon. They were sending this constant stream of mind-blowing evidence back to England. So Bates, they called him the butterfly hunter, he noticed something amazing in the Amazon. He saw that some totally harmless butterflies had evolved to look almost exactly like toxic species. This idea, which we now call Batesian mimicry, was just a perfect real-world example of natural selection in action. I mean, if you're a tasty butterfly that looks poisonous, you've got a huge survival advantage, right? Then you've got Fritz Muller. Darwin himself called him the Prince of Observers, which tells you something. Muller took this mimicry idea even further. He described a different kind where two already unpalatable species evolved to look like each other. And you might ask, why would they do that? Well, it makes it way easier for predators. The predator only has to learn one don't eat me pattern to avoid both species. It's like a strength in numbers defense. Mueller even came up with a mathematical model for it, the very first one in evolutionary ecology. How cool is that? And for Darwin, this stuff wasn't just, background noise. He saw this evidence coming from Brazil as absolutely critical. He actually wrote that Bates had applied the requisite touch of genius to his work. These weren't just interesting letters, they were the cornerstone proofs for his entire theory. Okay, so with all this physical data flooding in from all over the world, how did Darwin actually manage it all? Well, his desk wasn't some neat and tidy library. It was a workshop. And what he left behind is what archivists now call an unruly archive, a collection that's defined not by its order, but by its active, messy, chaotic use. Yeah, he didn't just file things neatly away. He incorporated them. I mean, look at this. He's pinning actual specimens, like these feathers, right onto his manuscript pages. The evidence literally becomes a part of the text. And the man was a relentless recycler. He'd slice out key paragraphs from letters, like the ones from Muller, and physically paste them into his notebooks. Nothing was set in stone. Everything could be reused, rejiggered, and put to work building an argument. And this really shows you what you end up with. His archive isn't some neat, linear record. It's a web, a network of connections. A page from an early draft might end up being used as the backing for a diagram years down the line. It was a working system, right? Designed for assembly and reassembly, not for easy filing. Which, of course, brings us to the hero, or maybe the villain of our story, the humble straight pin. Because for the poor conservators today trying to preserve this archive, Darwin's favorite little tool creates a massive headache. And the conflict is laid out perfectly right here. It's this constant battle between preserving the content and preserving the object. So, do you take the pin out? If you do, sure, you can read the text that's hidden underneath, you stop any rust damage, and you can catalog the pages separately. But, and this is a huge but, if you do that, you've just destroyed the original object that Darwin himself created. You lose his intentional connection, the very structure of his thought. It's a really tough call.
For a long, long time, the standard procedure was just remove the pins. But now, with new technology, researchers can actually have it both ways. They can effectively repin Darwin's thoughts digitally and see his genius in action like never before. Okay, let's look at a perfect example. This is a diagram from his 1880 book about how plants move. It looks super clean, right? Precise, scientific. It's showing the path a plant tip makes as it grows, a movement he called circumnutation. But how in the world did he record this? This is way before time-lapse photography. Well, the method was pure low-tech genius. He and his son Francis would glue this tiny little filament to a plant, then they'd look at it through a pane of glass and mark the position of the tip with ink every few hours. Then they'd just connect the dots and transfer that tracing to a piece of paper. Simple, but so clever. And boom, here it is. This is the real aha moment. The actual artifact isn't one clean drawing at all. It's a composite object. It's several of those transparent tracings all pinned onto a backing sheet. And that backing sheet, it's a recycled page from an old manuscript. You see, the pin isn't just holding paper together. It's literally constructing the final piece of evidence. So the modern solution for these kinds of documents is this really smart hybrid approach. Conservators carefully house the individual physical pieces to keep them safe, but then they use digital tools to repin them, recreating the original composite object on screen for researchers. And you can see exactly how they do it right here. They take photos of each layer separately, the individual tracings, the backing sheet, then they photograph the whole thing together just as Darwin intended it. This lets a researcher virtually peel back the layers to see both the final product and all the recycled, messy parts that went into making it. It's amazing. So when you think about it, the butterflies, the pins, the recycled scraps of paper, it all points to something much bigger, a really profound takeaway about what ideas even are. Look, ideas aren't just these abstract flashes of brilliance that happen in a vacuum. They are physical things. They're built. Darwin's world-changing theories were literally assembled, piece by piece, with scissors and glue and pins. His genius left a material trace. And by studying that trace, we get to understand his thinking in a whole new light. And that leaves us with one last thought. If a simple, everyday pin can totally rewrite the story of one of history's greatest thinkers, just imagine what other secrets are just sitting there, hiding in plain sight in our archives, just waiting for us to find them.